Welcome to Peace of Mind for Pet Parents, the podcast by BrightHaven Caregiver Academy. I'm Gail Pope.
And I'm Karen Wylie. And together we're here to support you in navigating life with your aging or ill pets. We know how deeply you care for your beloved companions, and we're here to offer guidance, understanding, and resources for this meaningful journey.
Each episode, we'll explore topics that address the daily challenges, emotional realities, and choices you face as a pet parent, helping you and your pets find peace, comfort, and joy. Whether it's making sense of a new diagnosis, adjusting to changing needs, or simply seeking a place to feel understood, you're not alone. Thank you for being here with us.
Hello, and thank you for coming back to Peace of Mind for Pet Parents. We're glad you're with us, and hopefully you are with us for part 2 of our conversation about how grief and hospice and natural transition can all intertwine and affect how we cope with loss of our pets. Gail, in terms of picking up where we were, let's begin talking about how grief is different for us if we allow or provide for ourselves essentially a wake for our pets at home. We've talked about this at other times about the 3-day honoring that you often did at BrightHaven. Of course, it doesn't have to be 3 days, but taking the moment to allow yourself, your family members, and your furry family members to see the body of the pet who has just passed and to understand that the pet has died. They don't just disappear and no one can find the pet. We were talking a little earlier about that was kind of what was done a lot for us as children. Suddenly the pets were gone. How do you think an honoring process or a wake for our own pets in our own home, even just for ourselves and our family and our pets, can affect grief and help in coping after the loss of a pet?
Ooh, I think this is multifaceted, beginning with the body, where you began the story. I think as a child, as many children I'm sure, I wasn't allowed to see a body after death. I might have seen an animal in the road and broken my heart about that. I guess as a child, if I had that experience when a human died, like my grandmother, behind closed doors, there's a fear, and it's like the body is disassociated from the being that I knew and loved. That's just the body. And in some ways, in a spiritual way, yes, that's the house they lived in. But you don't have to be frightened of that house. I think that was a process that I had to learn, because going in to the work that I do in the very beginning, euthanasia was the way, and the body was taken away. So it was a similar, I did see the body and I felt very comforted by being present. Then the body was taken away. It was only when I started again to learn more about spiritual issues in life and living, and it just suddenly seemed, why are we scared of the body? Learning more about Tibetan Buddhism and other cultures that honor the body after death, that's what opened the door for us at BrightHaven. Instead of just wrapping them up and loving them and grieving over them, let's honor them. And that changed grief. You could see it changed it for everybody in different ways. Yes, I think everybody grieves differently when there's a body. We had people, Carol, who works for BrightHaven, would often sit with the body in state, or not long after death, just sit in the energy with Reiki and just be with them. That would have an enormous impact on the energy, the ambience in the house with other animals. It just brought grief into a place where, oh gosh, it sounds awful if I say where it made it more comfortable. But I think you probably know what I mean, because there was a feeling of comfort being brought in this process of still saying goodbye. While you have the body and you're honoring the house that your loved one lived in, you're still sharing and caring with them to a degree. Again, maybe those baby steps where you're just stepping slightly down and getting used to the transition, because it's transition for us as well as for them.
Very much. When I would be allowing time after the physical death, I was allowing time for my other animals at first, more than thinking about the spiritual aspects or the soul aspects, because the soul has to leave the body. How long is that going to, what's that whole process like? So although I came to that later, my first motivation for allowing time for myself and my pets was really because if you think about the fact that I had been breeding purebred cats, everybody was related to somebody in one way. So when one of them would be dying, it was might have been the great grandmother of somebody else, and or a brother and a sister. They'd been together for 15 to 20 years as they would age out, we'll call it that. So they'd been together decades. And so I thought of, they just absolutely had to have time. So not only would they have the time during the dying process to be together, which is something you and I've talked about at other times as well, how our pets can take on the role of being doulas. Then making sure that they also had access to their member of their family after death. I'm probably not alone in this, but it doesn't matter whether they're in their last days or whether they've taken their last breath. I'm forever petting them. It's so hard to stop, even though they have died. Having this time, allowing this time for yourself in your home, I think is an incredible help to your ability to grieve and move forward whenever you're ready. If you think of euthanasia, both as it occurs at home or euthanasia in a clinic, as kind as the veterinarian who euthanized is trying to be, saying, take the time you need. If you're at the clinic, you know that you're in a room that they probably need for something else. So after 10 minutes or so, doors are usually being opened a little bit because they're looking to see if you're ready yet. So you don't feel like you have much time. And especially if you've chosen cremation at that point, your pet's body is going to be taken from you. And then at home, if you have home euthanasia with a mobile vet, they're also very considerate. From what everyone has told me, I've not personally had a mobile euthanasia, but all I ever hear is how kind they are and saying, take your time to say goodbye. They have paperwork they can do, and they do some other things to allow you to have a few minutes. I think having a few hours is better than a few minutes. And I know you, of course, would often allow even days.
Yes. You were saying about you first started this ritual thinking of your other animals and their need. It didn't dawn on me. Really, it was more about learning from the human perspective that it felt right to honor the body. But then I started to realize that our animal doulas and some others would want to come and pay their respects to the body. Of course, they'd never had that opportunity before. So that was amazing when I started realizing that. I'm just having pictures running through my mind of the different occurrences where animals have sat with other animals with such reverence, such reverence. Then it's as though they've gone through a letting go period. They've stayed for a few minutes or for a lot longer occasionally, particularly with Beauregard, who you may have heard me speak about. But then during the process, you can feel the reverence. Then Beauregard, for instance, would walk away, and 10 seconds later, he may be chasing a toy mouse. But it's a letting go. It was a beautiful event. It was some kind of circle of completion, perhaps, for them. And then they would move on. Others, particularly who may not have been close friends to the animal died, would walk on by with, oh, okay. And that was it. So I guess we're all a little like that, aren't we? I thought that was really interesting. And I think one of the things that helped me in grief as the altar gradually came into being, and I think it's really important for me now when an animal dies, I make them comfortable and look beautiful. Then come flowers. And how am I going to display? Then I start thinking, okay, so this is about their toys, their loved ones, their blanket. And I find myself walking around the house looking for things like, oh, he used to play with that. Oh, let me get, and picking up things. Oh, remember the day he knocked that crystal down and was chasing it with his paw across the floor? Let's get that crystal. So each honoring is different and very personalized. I think while you're thinking, you can't help but be joyful as well as terribly sad. It all mingles up together because you have this beautiful feeling of honor, respect, dignity, love, and grief. It all mixes together. So I think it's very healing, very healing.
I think it is too. And especially as you're describing it, where you're going around the house and he loved that. He loved that
Yeah.
toy. That was a favorite toy. Oh, that crystal he played with. You're grieving a little bit as you're making each of those decisions because of the memories. But as you're saying, the memory is both joyful and a source of grief. But as you're putting that altar together, overall, it can have a healing effect for you in those days, but also in the future. If we think about, again, to contrast how we do this with human loss and how we handle it with pets. With humans, we know generally there's a night or two of a wake where the body can be viewed in most cases. Friends and family and neighbors can come and they can share their memories of the individual and talk to the family members. Of course, this is one of the reasons during COVID, when these kind of public gatherings were not possible, a lot of people were very much struggling with grief because they didn't have the wakes, they didn't have the funerals, they didn't have the social support. But with our pets, we don't generally have public wakes. We don't generally have a ceremony at the burial site. So all these opportunities to be supported by other people in our lives, whether it's our family members, our friends, our neighbors, our coworkers, generally we're not getting any of that from the loss of a pet. So our grief is different and our grief is very often solitary. I found for the most part, it was my husband and me and the other furry members of the family. That's how we organized it. When I think about what you were able to do at BrightHaven and what you thought to do, because you had all your volunteers. The grief that was being felt about losses was not just yours, but there was a shared grief and allowing time for everyone to make a point to come by, even if it wasn't their day to volunteer, that there had been a death and they could be there. I think because we don't have these public wakes and funerals for our pets, it's very important that we think of how we can provide something like that for ourselves at home, in our homes.
Okay, the word celebration of life came to me as you were talking about what humans do. Sometimes a wake turns into a celebration of life, and that's immensely healing, a loving experience for many people. I think that made me look back to the days at Brighthaven where having that ritual was, in fact, offering a celebration of life. So everybody who was present during 1, 2, 3, or more days was celebrating that animal. And so it was lessening the grief. The other thing that came into my mind as I think about it, when I've created an altar and it's all in place and ready to go, that's generally the time I will just sit down on the floor in front of it and cry and let go. That's one of the most healing things to do. It's almost is, oh, you've joined the circle, you've come full circle, and it's time to take a deep breath, cry, let go, and remember that tears are probably the most healing thing that you can do because they release endorphins, which are the feel good chemicals. They really do bring comfort again. So letting go and crying is easing grief and bringing comfort.
So interesting to hear you say that. So this is one thing we've never talked about. Because I would cry after they died too. I think part of it was I would shed some tears over the
Yeah.
time leading up. I'm not trying to say I didn't, but after they died and I'd arrange everything so other animals could easily come into the room and be part of it. And I'm sitting there. I think the relief I felt would be not just the long road of caregiving, but that we done good, that we were able to allow a natural transition, that everything we did, our goal, our hopes, everybody got to say goodbye beforehand, everybody's getting to say goodbye now. It's like a sigh of relief. Not that it's done, because you still have to attend to the body and there are still decisions to be made. But I think when I cry in those moments, probably like 20 or 30 minutes after, and then the tears will come. But a lot of times I'm also smiling because I'm remembering things about that particular pet, and
Releases all your tensions.
it does. And the caregiving is a long road a lot of times. I always am grateful that I have that long road rather than shorter roads.
I think, judging from our conversation, that's a very wise thing to say. Caregiving is a long road, but also loving, living, that all of these things that we talk about, they're all long roads. And the road through grief is one of those long roads.
It is a long road.
We all take it in different ways and at different times. but it's one of our lessons in life that we all have to learn.
It is. Death is a process. Seeing the body helps reduce disbelief and shock and everything else. There are things we can do when our pets are dying and after they have died that can help us in this grieving process. I know one of the things we've talked about at times is that while we're focused on caregiving for one, there's still the daily routines for everybody else. So that's always been something that brings us back to the current needs. Routines are so much a part of how we care for our animals all the way through.
Definitely.
All right, my dear. Have we done this topic in? Is there anything you would like to say before we close this second part of our conversation about grief?
I don't think so. I think we've certainly done it justice. It just brings back for me the thing that I say all the time. It's all about love, particularly in grief. It is about accepting yourself as who you are and how you grieve and taking baby steps through life to continue on.
So true. We're not saying providing hospice care for pets makes grief easy, but I think we have described how it can be a little less tangled up with guilt and shock and doubt and allows you to finish your goodbyes in ways that other paths do not. The grief will still hurt. We're still going to miss them, and we're going to miss the love we felt when we had them in our arms, but we do learn to move forward. Thank you for being with us today, as always, and we look forward to being with you again next week. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us on Peace of Mind for Pet Parents. We hope today's episode has offered you support and insight as you care for your aging or ill pets.
Remember, it's not just about the end, it's about living well at every stage of life. To continue your journey with us, explore more resources at BrightHaven Caregiver Academy's website, brightpathforpets.com, where you'll find guides, assessments, and a caring community of pet parents like you.
Until next time, may you and your pets find comfort, connection, and peace in every moment. Take care.